the Loki finale. Before we get into it, I would like to take just 1 second to say they finally done it. They gave us a fulfilling ending to a series.
Yeah. And not in any way that either of us really predicted.
No, it was genuinely so well done.
I thought I'd nailed it. Because if you remember, my prediction was it's just going to end with the loom's broken
Yeah.
and the whole TVA gets reset. And with the way the final was going, and it was leading up to this realization that, like, there is no fixing this situation. It's inevitable. I was like, okay, it's gonna end how I expected. And I'm okay with that because the pacing's been fine. And then they just go and like give us the greatest ending and character ending, even though it's not full end, but like character wrap up
Yeah.
of character development that we've ever had.
Loki might be the first post Endgame project
Mm,
that has really improved my love of a character.
yes.
Like Spider-Man No Way Home, I obviously adored, but it didn't do that much more for Spider-Man. Doctor Strange 2 didn't do that much more for Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
This is the first project where afterwards I'm like, I already love this character. I now love this character even more.
I would count that with Hawkeye, I think, added a lot
That's fair.
to
That is
Clint.
fair. 100%. I think the reason I probably didn't think of that was because Hawkeye was always a bit
It's,
of a take it or leave it character for
yeah.
me. But now that you say that, you are absolutely right. That show did a lot to round out
I
Clint as
think
a
that is
character.
the only other character I can think of, though. I think you're right. Like,
Yeah,
of the staple heroes, like,
100%.
this is the first one since Endgame where it feels they've developed a character even like to a higher point than they were.
Yeah. The tone shift was really interesting as well.
Mm,
Going from this idea of him like spending centuries and centuries learning everything so that he could work out the perfect situation to make the loom
work.
solution work. And like you get like this Groundhog Day kind of training montage.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, there were so many like steps of levels to as it progressed, and like you say, it started off with he's back where the last episode ended with him as Victor's just gone down. She's like, okay, watch it all again. And he goes and asks Obi, what could we have done? And it's just like, we ran out of time. She's like, we just got to be quicker. And he tries being quicker a few times, but it still don't work. So he's like, okay, need more time. So then he tries more time. That still doesn't work. So then he's like, spends every like sentence is him perfecting like what's said between everyone, cutting as much time down. Then he's like, okay, I'll just learn quantum physics essentially. And Obi's like, oh, you need decades, centuries even. And then that idea that all we get is a title card of centuries later. The idea that and like I know probably to a god like Loki, centuries isn't actually that long of a time, but
As a time
still,
perception for Loki, it wouldn't be as painful as it would be for us.
yes.
But we've also got to remember, based on the way the time slipping was shown to us, it
Mm.
looks like he was only going back maybe like 2 hours
Well, yeah, he just kept going back.
into that loop.
Yeah, so
So it's
he's
like it's centuries, but it's the same 2 hours.
yeah, which is wild for anyone
Yeah.
to like just be living in. And I actually think, does that make him the smartest person at the moment in the MCU? He is
Probably not.
okay.
Because
He's
I'd say only because it's such a niche.
true.
Like it's not like he spent that time just learning everything
Yeah,
about
true.
everything. He was like, just teach me what I need to know to make this thing work.
Yeah, he learned everything about time and the loom and
Yeah.
that
And I
stuff.
guess
Yeah,
the
I suppose.
question is also, do we know if he actually learnt it,
Or just
or if he
memorized.
just became a vessel to save Obi like thinking time?
Hmm.
So he would learn what
Possibly.
Obi did at
Well,
that point, and
No, I
then
think he
he would
did.
learn it, he would do it, and then OB would like just go, "Oh, so from here we need to do this," and then he'd learn that bit, if that makes
No,
sense.
I think he might have done because he like essentially built it, and Obi's like, well, we don't know, we haven't tested. Like he essentially just built the thing for Obi.
Yeah, I guess my point is, did he just do it so many times that he was essentially just taking OB's thoughts,
Yeah, possible. Yeah,
like
true. Yeah, yeah,
instead
yeah.
of
I get you.
like you writing the Lord of the Rings, you just read the book and just wrote the next word each time. If
Yeah,
that
I
makes
get
sense,
you.
like you don't necessarily have to take in any of the understanding.
Yeah,
You just have to remember the physical process of it.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting. It was very well done though.
There was so many
Um,
like little funny nods as well to things like when he pulls the model out and he's like, "Obi, it's great. Don't worry about it. Yes, no, this isn't you or me, Morbius. This is Victor Timely." And he's like, before any of those questions or like things that we already know happened start, he's like shutting them down left and right.
the best bit is Victor going, "Why is it me?" He's like, "Because you volunteer. You always volunteer. You're quite insistent, actually."
But
um,
yeah, he
and so
just keeps
I
doing
really,
that.
I really enjoyed the tone shift though when it should have worked, and there was
Mm,
enough time in the episode left where I'm like, "This might have worked," and then we've got another 20 minutes to wrap up the rest of this story and set up what's next.
mm.
And then Victor just breaks down. He's like, "It's a scaling problem.
Well, yeah,
The
they.
loom just keeps getting bigger. How do we keep
That's
up with infinity?"
so yeah, that's the thing. I thought what was great is that like when he gets that final attempt where they essentially succeed at their task, and it's like the way that by this point Loki knows like there's a tannoy he can speak over, and it's the way he's like, "That's it, keep on going, one more step, just keep going. You're doing great. You can do this." And then he
Don't
goes, he's
forget,
like,
don't put it
"Don't,
down.
don't put it down. It rolls away. That's great." And then he's
I
like,
would love I would love to see the version where he found out it rolls off the gangway because he's clearly got so far and
"Yeah,
he's rolled off. He's like, "Oh."
yeah." And then it's like the button sticks when he turns around to look at him, give it some willy. And then obviously it does it, and he's like, "Holy shit, I've finally done it after centuries." And then it just fails. And there's like that real like, then that's when you say Victor Tanner goes, it's never gonna work. You can't scale for infinity. It's like dividing by zero. It just doesn't, it's just impossible.
And you know what as well, because it's so beautifully simple.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind this is supposed to be a complicated thing that no mere human like us would really understand.
Mm.
Just being able to go, "You can't scale to infinity," makes sense instantly to everyone. Everyone's like, "Oh
Well,
shit, yeah, there's just always going to be more of it. How do you keep
well,
up
yeah.
with there always being more?"
Yeah, like as soon as they say that, you go, of course. Like every time it branches, one small difference, like on at any point on any of those branches makes another, and like every branch duplicates, and it's
No,
never going to
totally.
stop if you're not pruning.
And it's not just that it's infinite as well. It's infinitely exponential
Yes.
because the more branches there are more branches to
Yeah.
have, more deviations to have. So it's not even just like a straight line if it keeps on being
No.
more. It gets faster. Um,
And then I like that. That's when we get him jumping back to. Oh,
the battle
sorry.
from season one.
Well, no. Then he goes. Doesn't he go to when he gathered everyone?
No,
Or was that
that's once
after?
he's got that's once he's got full control, and
Oh,
he
yeah,
who
it is. It
remains
is. It is.
explains to him what he needs
So
to do.
yeah, we go back to the end of season one, which
Yeah,
so cool to be back at that
yeah.
again.
So Loki basically works out that because of the nature of the loom, he needs he who remains because he's the only one who understands it enough
Mm.
to work out how to make it work. So
But
he has to go back and convince Sylvie not to kill him so he can get the information he needs from him.
yes, and also he sort of realizes that this is happening because we've changed how the TVA works. If I stop Sylvie, nothing changes. The TVA is as it was. We just go on. with how it used to be. Because he just
Exactly.
wants his friends back at this point. Like, he just wants things to go back to normal. And then, yeah, we get him trying so many different approaches to stop Sylvie. Um, and then that constant line of "see you again," and you just not always seeing it, but just hearing it, to the reveal was a twist I didn't see coming.
It had, within such a short space of time, two of the greatest reveals I can think of.
Mm,
To go from the very funny line from Loki, because like he's clearly, we now know, playing it off like a bit of banter, but it seems to us at the time like he's like just trying to workshop how he's going to make this work. So he says, "You never try and stop her. Why'd you never try and stop her?"
yeah,
Kind of like me or you do. Like when we're playing a video game, you're up against a really difficult boss. You're like, "Right, let me try this. Okay, this doesn't work.
yeah.
Forget that." And he's like going through, and then Kang just picks up his little doohickey and freezes time. And he's
And then
like,
it's like,
So, how many times you done this now?" So
and then
good.
it's like, but the way that they did this was so fucking smart, because obviously they, at this point, like, this is, to us, the first time this has happened.
Yeah.
And he frees, and then Loki, like, the way Loki like presents himself is like, "What the fuck? You've frozen time? Like, you've just made Sylvie disappear?" And then he's having this conversation, and he's just like, "So yeah, how many times have we done it? You not got the hang of like the freezing time thing yet? Oh, maybe you need a few more goes yet." Um, and then he explains like, "This was always the plan. Like, this was, he set this situation up. Like, he foresaw this all happening because he knew Sylvie would kill him. He knew the loom would fail. He knew Loki would try and fix things because he wants."
And he knew that he'd go through Victor timely.
Well,
And
yeah.
also,
Well, I
I know.
think it's essentially he set up multiple options, right?
Yeah.
So in case Loki or that things didn't play out that way, Victor Timely would come along and still would fix things to go back to pruning. It would be like he set up like multiple options of fail safes,
Yeah.
but
The really funny thing to me, and I thought it was cool at the time, but I didn't realize quite how much it was seen as impressive. A lot of acting on voice coaches
mm,
were insanely impressed with Jonathan Majors as He Who Remains, doing an impression
mm,
of Victor
it
Timely.
wasn't
Because
quite there.
yeah, so like a lot of people in the voice acting world have always said one of the best bits of voice acting ever was, I forget the voice actor's name. He did Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny,
Mm,
and they said one of the best bits of voice acting ever was when he did a Bugs Bunny impression as Daffy Duck and a Daffy Duck impression as Bugs Bunny, and you could tell they were the character doing an impression,
yeah,
which is so difficult to do because when they're both your voice,
yeah,
doing an impression in one voice of another voice is very, very difficult
well,
to do.
yeah, because you would
So
tend to just do the voice.
yeah, exactly. So him as one version of Kang doing
Mm.
what is very clearly an impression of another version is so impressive.
Oh yeah, and it's like, so he's obviously playing Loki, and there's, I can't remember what it is Loki says, but there's
So Kang goes, let go through a few thousand more times, and once you've got the hang of it a little bit, we'll talk again.
yeah, but Loki then says something I'm forgetting now that kind of like he who remains doesn't really have an answer for. Oh, what is it? He says something like weird. Oh, it's the yeah, like he who remains says that to him, and then Loki goes, uh he gives like a poem or something he recites about death or like friends and death. I can't remember what it was exactly. But he says those two lines, and then he who remains kind of looks at him in a weird way and he's like, "Mm, whatever, you have a few more times." And I think that's meant to show at that point, Loki realizes, okay, now I'm outside of what he expects because he didn't know how to respond to that. And then that's when Loki goes, and freezes time himself, and he's like, why do you think this is the first time we've had this conversation? And then it's
And
like, oh shit.
you know what my favorite part of that is? That is Loki distilled in his purest form, because that is
Yes.
the trickster god. He's
It's
like, how can you possibly think you are in control of this
well,
situation? I am Loki. I am the mischievous one.
that's the wild thing. It's like season one, when it all like when season one kicked off, we're all like, what's the angle Loki's playing here? He's like constantly trying to trick them and play things into his hand while they think they're getting the upper hand. By the end of season two, we think he's past that because of how much his character's developed. We kind of forget that that is still his nature. And like you
Fair.
say, it's that whole trickery of like, no, I'm the one in fucking control here.
Yeah. I
Joke's
am the
on
one
you.
who knocks. I am the
Yeah.
danger. That
Um,
kind of, yeah.
and then yeah, then he's like, oh, and he sees the equation. And that's when I thought also another moment with Jonathan Majors is we see him drop the He Who Remains persona, and he is Kang. And I thought that was very cool to see that suddenly he's not this like comedy sort of like bouncy character.
Yeah.
He's
He
suddenly
stops being
like,
like a caricature and he's
yeah,
like, okay, cool. We're at the point now where this isn't a game for me anymore.
yeah.
This is now when we can actually have a proper fucking conversation and
Hmm.
come to a solution.
It's like, oh, he's okay, he is where he needs to be. This shit's real now. And then it's like his complete tone changes. And I was like, okay, now he feels like a Kang.
It was the gamer move of like when you go down 2-0 and just lean forward. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now we're ready.
And it's just like, there is no stopping it. Either the loom blows up, it's a fail safe. It will always destroy everything but the
Which
sacred
which is
timeline.
genius, because we've been a bit confused the whole time. Like, well, how did it exist before the TVA? What's like the problem here?
Mm,
Why do we need the loom? Um, and like the way it's designed of just, well, no, you try and open up the multiverse, the loom blows up,
yeah,
destroys all the branches, and then the TVA is rebuilt before the branches can build up again,
yeah.
and you're back to square one. It's genius.
And then he's like, or the other option is you get rid of that, you get rid of the TVA, and you unleash another war of Kangs. And he's like, you don't want that on your conscience. And essentially, he's been like, there's two options, both are bad. Which is the better of two evils? And trying to pin him into a corner and having that very like, no act, no thing. Like, there you go, that's it laid out. And then obviously he sees the equation and that like jogs some idea in his head. And then that's when he goes,
Yeah, so he who remains basically says to him, the only way you can save all of existence is if you kill Sylvie.
yeah,
And that's when he then goes back to the last moment where he had the timeline version of their team all together.
mm-hmm.
And as they started to disintegrate, he basically froze time and rewound it a little bit, so it's just him and Sylvie.
And she's like,
And he
what the fuck?
explained, yeah, he explained to Sylvie, I've been time jumping all over the place. I went back to the battle. I've spoken with Kang, and she's like, and the only way to protect everything is to save me. And he basically, like, what I will say is with this season, I wasn't that impressed with how they used Sylvie, because
Mm,
they treated Sylvie like a different character instead of a different version of Loki.
yeah, I
And
get
I
you.
feel like although they will obviously have slightly different opinions from
Mm,
life experiences, they should still be able to understand what the other one is feeling and thinking a fair bit of the time.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like this scene was the only scene all season where we got any of that. Sylvie kind of was able to look at him and kind of piece together a little bit of what happened. She was like, right, so you need to kill me. But in doing that, everyone loses their free will.
Yeah, I think the only other time I can think of what saw like a hint of that as well was that bar scene where she's just trying to get him to actually say she knows why he's doing what he's doing. She got him to say it. But yeah, like you say, she pieces it together off him, and then it's like I feel like they set it up in that moment where we think, oh shit, he's gonna go kill Sylvie. Like
Yeah.
this is kind of him telling her so he has some way of accepting what he has to do. And
Him kind of retroactively asking her for forgiveness because obviously he would have
yes,
killed a version of her before this.
uh, but she doesn't want it. She's like, I'm not going to give you permission to. You got to make that decision yourself. And then we go back to Meltdown again.
Yeah,
And it's like, what the fuck? We're back here again. Okay. Expecting to go back and he's going to kill Sylvie. And he was like, okay, maybe he's going to say goodbye to everyone one last
yeah,
time or something. And then he just fucking walks out there. Well, he fucking sprints down the steps on his own
yeah.
like a madman.
Locks it
Oh,
all behind him.
and we get the speech that we heard him
In the
say to
first
Odin.
Thor
Yeah,
film.
in the first four, which he said to Odin
Yeah.
again, which is like such a nice full circle moment.
Uh, well, apparently that was improvised by Tom Hiddleston as well.
Oh shit!
That was his idea, and he improvised that. That wasn't the director or writer's plan. That was his
Oh,
idea.
that's so good. The man knows
There is nothing I love more than actors who love
a
the
character.
franchise and the character they're a big part of, and therefore they can like be so much more involved in the creative
Mm.
process of it in making it feel more lived in. Because especially something like Marvel, how many different writers and directors have used Loki who are all going to have slightly different opinions?
Hmm.
The one constant has been Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah,
So if he can sprinkle in a bit of himself into it, it makes the character feel more consistent.
and it's also in those moments like the writer on Loki possibly, most likely, didn't write the first four, so wouldn't like on the top of their head have that locked away in the back of the mind that that's a line Loki said. Whereas Tom Hiddleston was like, this would be a really great moment where there's that line I said to Odin where I wasn't like a god at that point, and this person he was trying to be, he feels has come full circle. Why don't we put it in now? The fans love it because they're like, he said that the line from 4-1. Like, we're all come back round.
Yeah.
Uh,
So he lets the loom blow up. He tanks the temporal radiation like a G. I can only assume that's as like a side effect of his time slipping, is that he's just kind of immune to
I
temporal
think that
radiation.
and him being a god
Yeah,
with.
as Guardian physiology goes nuts.
I was just like, the way
We've
you just
seen
walked out
Thor
there, and I was
tank a
like,
star.
I felt like being like, why didn't you do this from the beginning? Bro could always do this.
So, one thing I did see a lot of confusion about when the loom blew up
Hmm.
and all of like the strands went everywhere and they were dying. A
Hmm.
lot of people seem confused as to why they were dying.
Okay.
And I've seen one theory that makes complete sense to me.
Okay.
So I'm kind of electing for that to be the truth because it makes the most sense, unless I'm told otherwise. But basically, the strands look like they're dying and losing their light.
Hmm.
And people seem to think that's because the loom was broken. So what you get is you're getting all of the Kangs coming back,
Right.
and that's causing instantly a war across the multiverse where everything is
Okay.
dying and being destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's why Loki has to stop grabbing them and pouring his magic into them, because what he's doing is essentially erasing the Kangs from them timelines
Okay.
to allow them timelines to be free. So instead of the Loom just having one timeline with no Kangs,
Hmm.
he is acting as a multi-Loom
Yeah.
and like is watching all of the timelines and like going in and going
Yeah.
none of this, none of that, and allowing all of these multiversal timelines to coexist.
Yeah. I just kind of like took it as there was nothing like if you think we had the sacred timeline, there was a certain level of there was a the sacred timeline, but obviously it had like multiple strands because obviously multiverses that were all the sacred ones. I took it as like because they're not being like weaved into one thing, giving each other that like energy. It like they didn't have they were all separated and alone they can't survive, but they need to be like stranded into one That's kind of what I took it as, and then Loki's just taking control of them.
What Another thing I did find really interesting, I'm not sure if it was just an artistic choice or if it was a wink wink nod nod moment. But at first, you notice how all of them were quite slack,
Yeah,
and then they tightened up really strict, and then we got like a panning shot.
yeah.
It looked a lot like a web to me in that moment.
Yeah, so that was another thing. When they all then spread out, I also was like, well, that's how the Spider Verse was doing it as like a web of
Yeah,
timelines,
yeah,
and that made like in my head, I'm like, okay, that makes sense because there are times where, yeah, sure, certain points on multiple timelines will match up and they can cross over, and it's
yeah.
like it
And you'll
doesn't.
have parts that are parallel and stuff like that.
It
Yeah,
like it. That's why. But then with the dying, I was like, oh shit, it's all dying. I also really enjoyed the transition they did of his outfit
yeah.
into um with his cape then turning and merging into strands as well. His horns
The
were the same marble
the
and
horn
gold.
design was so good.
So clever.
The
Um
costume design was phenomenal for that.
yeah. Uh,
Um, and then the strands will form into the Erd tree.
yeah. Also to note, from that moment of him stepping out, no dialogue. All just music and atmosphere, and the whole time I'm just like mouth open, like holy shit, what is happening?
Raw aura.
Yes, and yeah, like he just gathers all the strands, goes to the remains of where he who remains sat. All the gold makes him a little throne. We get all those things where he talked about he didn't want a throne, or he wanted a throne, then had given
Yeah,
up the idea of a throne, and now he's like, now he gets a throne in solitude
yeah.
when all he wanted is his friends.
The I genuinely think
Hmm.
that while we were nervous when we were told there was no reshoots,
Mm.
and we said it's very cocky to say we knew what we wanted to shoot and we shot it,
Mm.
my man, he chefed it up. He
I,
cooked.
I will say, from other than like those couple of times where we said we noticed voiceover
Yeah,
add-ins and little things like that, they they were right. They didn't need to
yeah.
reshoot.
They
There
they
is
definitely didn't need to add anything. They might have, if the strikes weren't happening, they might have gone, we
clean up
could do
things.
this one scene better, so we might just reshoot it. But I see their point.
Yeah. There's just the way that ended, where we got like the parallel, the visual effects for it of all the strands of Loki taking them, and then it's like it pans out and it looks like a loom, but in green, and then it pans, and you've got the
It
fucking
was right in
tree.
front of us the whole time, though. Branches.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like they could have called variations in the timeline whatever they wanted,
Mhm.
but they called them branches, and they're like, ah, got the sacred timeline, can't handle branches. What can handle branches? Trees. It's the Erd tree.
Mhm.
It's so beautiful. I love
Yeah,
it so
it
much.
was, and the visuals were stunning. And honestly, like the first one where the ending, we said it at the beginning, but the ending, the pacing, everything actually felt on point.
Uh huh.
And it may have taken them several attempts, but I think they have finally nailed an MCU TV show.
100%. Um. Now, what I will say is, off the back of this,
Hmm.
an interesting theory is coming to light.
I was about to say, I think this
Yeah.
is the same theory I was going to bring up.
Um. Obviously, a lot of people noticed that obviously Loki's powers are very green based,
Hmm.
and he's now god of time. It seems.
The God of Stories.
Um. And the time stone was green,
Hmm.
and then people went, "Wait, Wanda had reality based powers, and she was changing reality at her own whim." and her powers were red, and the Reality Stone was red. And obviously, we know the Infinity Stones don't exist anymore.
Mm.
What if characters
Yep.
are being taken, and based on their colors and the power set matching up, they are being shifted into replacing the Infinity Stones?
Hmm.
I don't dislike the theory,
I don't either. This
especially if it's
idea,
done right.
yeah, the idea that they're taking the legacy characters that they knew they essentially were trying to move away from because they wanted to set up the next set, but doing it in a way that like they are not being like killed off or anything, but they're essentially elevating to the point where they are becoming like the time stones so powerful that they become these like s- incredible beings for specific things. I'm not against it.
No, not at all. And there's like a very obvious one for the Power Stone as well, because Power Stone was purple. I know what you're thinking. There's no one who's purple, but traditionally the Incredible Hulk wore purple shorts, and I'm so down for them to go that direction. Just give us one scene of Bruce finally wearing purple shorts.
And him just going like full strength. I
It's
mean,
definitely an interesting theory. I don't know where it would be played out unless what they do is they set the characters up as these Infinity Stone replacements and, like I said, elevate them to these incredible levels.
hmm,
And then them six characters end up being the big characters for fighting Kang at the very end, or the Beyonder, or Doom, or whoever the big bad that they're like, we need Infinity Stone level power for.
yeah, it could be interesting. I also to tie into as well with that. Obviously, a lot of people saw the Tom Hiddleston interview thing where he was like, "This wraps up 14 years of Loki and his story," and everyone's like, "Oh my god, is this the end? Is this him saying the finale? Is his final thing?"
Yeah, he did add more context to that though, didn't he?
He did, I think. Yeah,
I believe he said, I've said goodbye and written emotional letters on two separate occasions just to come back. So at this time, I think it would be unwise to think I'll never play
yeah.
Loki again.
I think what we can expect is at the beginning, at the end of season one, I had in my head, I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if this Loki rocks up and goes to see Thor, so Thor can see his brother again. But I don't think that happens now because obviously he is in control of the timelines. He's going to treat them with the way that they're meant to go and allow them to run their course without interference. So essentially, that is their new motto: is to let the tree grow and not trim or interfere if they don't need to. Um, I think we don't see this Loki ever come back in his. Like, he's never going to leave the tree. He's there forever. That is his burden now, is to sit in that tree alone. But I think you said it in our chats. Like, he can show visions of himself probably on any timeline at any point that he wants to help guide certain people if he needs to.
I put it this way: for the first time, really, in this series, we've seen Loki use his ability to like mirror himself.
Hmm.
That can't be a coincidence. I would not be surprised if that is them setting up an easy explanation for Loki appearing somewhere else and time not falling apart. And it's also an easy way to depower him slightly, because they can
Hmm.
just go, well, he's a projection. What can he do?
What if they use him like a watcher?
That would also be very cool.
And we just see a very faint green Loki in the sky at certain points.
It's a little like Watcher style head with like little
Yeah,
green emerald eyes. It'd be cool. Um,
there's a lot.
it was quite an emotional ending though,
Yeah, it
because like we
was.
said, Loki's been in the MCU since the very beginning.
Hmm.
Like,
We've seen him grow a lot as a character.
if we remember the Iron Man 1, the Hulk film, and
Hmm.
Thor 1, all in canon take place in the same week, which is
Hmm.
known as Fury's Big Week.
Yeah.
Like, Loki is tied to the very beginning of the MCU very delicately. So to see, like I said, 14 years, all these projects from absolute villain to anti hero to good guy
Hmm.
to now protector and keeper of all time
Hmm.
is such a beautiful character arc.
Yeah. For him to like finish off and everyone's dubbing it like here's the god of stories. It's like you say, from villain to now the god of stories, which is like a flip of him being the god of mischief, even though he wasn't a true god at that point when he first appeared. Like just shows how far he's come as a character.
100%. I couldn't be happier for it. And I hope this isn't the last we see of Tom Hiddleston in the MCU. And I hope they do find an excuse to bring him back for something else.
It would be very cool.
Now,